body, lie on the props as if your main focus is really using your props and adapting your structure as you lie back over the bolster, which is really in this rib structural openness and reset, right? This is a resetting when you start your class for your circulation. And the block under your pelvis might feel like an extra amount of security that you have. But you might start with that just to notice how much core that you are in, that's in your container. Okay, so we have our head on our blankets. We have a belt kind of right behind our brain. And then add some weight, even if you have just a little bit of weight, maybe you have a smaller bag than this. I still want you to try putting something at the front of the hip bones. And if the legs stay bending, and that feels the best balance for your back muscles, stay with a bending leg set. And if you can work on extending the heels forward and down, go with reaching through the surface structure of your thighs and let that sand be, nudged on your legs so that you can feel the lids of the legs as if the lids, right, get kind of, they grapple with tension being connected to your pelvis. Just think of all the connectors that tighten up when we sit. So I want you to work on creating that length in that space, not just the stomach length, but also the front of the thighs. So the block will help with that. Now, as you reach back for your belt, ensure that your head is comfortable on your blankets. If you happen to have a boost, like a scrunchie or something, that's a little bit of a booster in some ways. But be thoughtful that the position of your neck is even, balanced, so the blanket is not under your neck, it's just under your head, not scrunched up to the shoulders. And then position your hands wide on the belt and feel if you can hold that belt and open the chest and feel when the arms are touching onto that blanket stack that the chest muscles are comfortable in this openness. It's not a pressurized position. You feel some breathing focus to begin. So the fluctuations of awareness of the breathing into the structure and then down, letting the legs have a feeling of a little bit of turning out. So I really encourage those legs to experiment with the rotation without the soles of the feet together, right? They're separating. And that quality of circulation in your chest is fairly mild, right? The bolster is setting the back of the chest, and then your work is on reaching with your hands on the belt. And try it without the belt. Feel what it's like when you let go and you separate the arms to what you consider a quality presentation of opening the chest and then relaxing the eyes and exploring the space in the front of the body opening. All the spaces. Even the throat, right? If that feels jammed down, you might find you're more comfortable with a little tilt of the head. Inhale for a count of 4. And let go for a count of 5 to 6. Study the breath pace. Think of this as a new phase of the pose and be patient with your breathing self as the exhale lengthening can be challenging. You might be getting out 5 count. And that could be just the very edge of it for you. Now we'll start exploring the deeper back bend, and consider that the props have spent some time trying to build your structure to kind of be in agreement with this opening. Now, if we have issues with back rounding or scoliosis, things like that, this is going to be a very significant charge in the body. So when you start to move your legs closer, right, that can be your first noticeable circulation in your core. So think of it as kind of like your legs go closer now. And it's like there's a zipper, right, from the inside of your heel up in towards the midsection to the ribs. Okay, now, of course, the sand can be thought of as an intruder, right? So you might place that aside. And as you slide your feet towards your seat, so the knees bend, we first feel the leg position is supporting the ease of my back. And so I want you to shift your body over to the side so that you can simply move your block away. And then put that block so you've got one overhead. Okay. Now feel if the tailbone starts to lead itself on the curve of the bolster. You want to feel that contour, the curve of the back. So you might be doing really well with the sensation kind of panel in your body. Think of it as like a study, the sensation panel. And if my feet widen, it doesn't seem to make a big difference for me, but it might for you. So take a moment to feel the width of the feet, not necessarily trying to get them closer in, but find a natural hip width and the arch of the spine. And before we turn, I want you to notice the pace of the breath. So the inhale, exhale current. Just give yourself a few moments with that. And if it's different than the last few moments when we had the block under, if it's easier to get a longer in-breath when the back is this arched, it's likely so. And if the exhale is a little stunted, working with that length, you'll find it changes with the positional change, right? With your breathing pattern. So a supine position has some challenges for us, right? It's also structurally not our reality, okay? So we'll just do poses that aren't our reality. How about that? Okay, so now as you rotate to the left, waist on the bolster, see if you can use your hand. I know looking at the screen can be a little bit jarring, but I want you to look to your right hand and slide your body so your ribs are really in the bolster, right? They're not stuck inside, I hope yet, but you are pushing into that bolster. Now, I need something on the inside of the right knee, but you might be content with a block or a ball. And as that right leg is back, I can push it so it stretches the femur. So the front of my thigh is in a slope. It kind of drops down and it reaches, but also my pelvis, like arching and tucking and moving my hips, will actually lead me to a little bit more ease with that control. So establish the legs, and then since you're going to be the sand person here, you're going to place the sand, if you're using it at all, across the hip bone, right at the juncture of the leg and the rib. So the rib kind of cape would be nice, this rib sink, all right? And then as you lean into your blankets with your brain and you reach over with maybe one block, or maybe you decide that the block height is a little ambitious and you want to go lower, which is probably more stretch, then you work towards the experimental phase of the breathing again, right? The fluctuation of the angle of your breathing in the costal, right? The intercostals. So we've moved from this diaphragmatic breathing to costal breathing. And as you find a way to get this right arm comfortable, which might not be here, and this might be too much with the arm over. So you can have your arm besides on your side. Could be in motion. And it might be down on the bolster. Okay, so feel, even if it suggests to you that it might be intense to move your shoulder back. And in space, if that is actually a little more comfortable in your nervous system, so if you respond by sensations of discomfort, that's a sign to kind of back off a little bit and then feel the weight of your head on the blanket. Let the neck relax. Feel if you can encourage a little stretch of your neck here by letting the weight of your brain empty into the blankets. All the thoughts too. That's what makes it feel kind of heavy. Okay, so with the belly cooperating with the breath, try to feel in your personal self the connectivity of breathing, relaxing the mind. I know it's definitely a part of the structure, but it does have its jittery moments of shifting focus. So as you are in the structure, can you sometimes relate to feeling in the structure, the sides? Okay, so today I want us to add in the twist on this one so we can feel the movements of the back from the hip joint into the thoracic vertebrae, the mid body, and then letting the neck get some ease. So stay with the side sage for a few more moments. And when you're in the side position, can you feel the body rock a little side to side? Seems reasonable. You move your weight to the left hip. You move your weight back. And the broadness of the ribs is obviously easier when you're on your back, but you still can work with this rib flexibility here. In fact, twists are where we work with it the most. So let's take that sand aside. And when you turn now, we're going to twist. We're going to turn so that our ribs rotate. If you have your ball under the knee and you want to keep that, you could, but I'm encouraging you to pull that left knee closest to the bolster that it can arrive. And then I'm going to pivot the bolster right up onto the blankets. And so when it goes straight up, then I lower, and when I lower, I have my left corner of my ribs trying to turn as if I'm trying to get my belly kind of flat onto the bolster. You don't have to have your leg like this. If you want your legs together, stacked, that's fine. But when you come down to lower your head and turn it to the right, you might hug the bolster. This is something I like to do sometimes. If my bolster's propped up on my blankets, I can kind of snuggle with the bolster. Bolster snuggling, okay? And the ideal experience is that it's relaxing. Right? And if the ball in the position of the leg is not working for you, bring your knees closer together. And you might have the ball still stuck to you even if you try that. So you're in a fetal position. Gradually reach through the spine, feel the connection from your upper back between the shoulder blades down into the tailbone. And this ought to be easy for the back to relate to. So if you aren't snuggling with the bolster, you can have your arms so they're positioned a little bit out from the bolster in more of a goalpost pose. Noticing the heart rate. And then relaxing any judgment about the intensity. It's pretty mellow. So enjoy the mellow patterns that are in between these shapes, because they have a purpose to mobilize the spine and nourish between the spine and the belly organs. Good, so feel the belly and its contact, and if it's partially not touching the bolster, which is realistic, you still want to encourage the abdomen to be soft and to move with the breath. Now as the hands are now under the shoulders, position them there, and feel the lurking of the shoulder forward. We're going to push to come up. And what I want you to work towards now is to turn. You're going to actually get your belt first and your block on the other side. So get your props from the other side on the back of your mat forward. And we're going to take a Supta Baddha Konasana, bound angle, or bound ankle. It's kind of what it is, isn't it? So this prop setup might be substantial for you. It might need to be higher. So this will be a little more challenging for our hips. If we have our bolster a tiny bit lower, then I usually set it. So your body's warming up. And so if we come into our seated forward of our bolster position, take the blocks under the positioned knees open, feet together. And then your belt, which I think is buckled up still, you're going to now put it over your head, around your lower hips. Truly, it's kind of going to be around the back of the rear, isn't it? And then tighten that up. Maybe you don't need to, but you're going to be focused on getting that buckle close to your hip. So it's easy to loosen, unbuckle if you have an emergency. And when that buckle is close enough, then we put our sand on either our feet or across the ribs. So your choice is in your hands. Okay, so you've got your sand on the feet, or when you recline, you'll be a little cautious with the knees pointing up and then lower back, and really get that setting for the positional balance of your hips. So I know the spine is a real obvious position that doesn't need a lot of instruction, but the legs, right? Let's say you're fairly mobile in your thighs, right? Maybe you can move your knees out to touch closer to the floor. We still want to have the block supporting our knees at minimum, so that we're not overstretching the SI joint, right? We don't want to cause what occurs sometimes in the overly flexible. So we work towards a little balance. And my preference is to contour the blocks under my legs. And I have to kind of stuff them in. Otherwise, it actually, after a while, it seems to slide. So if I get pretty tucked in with my blocks, and then I reach my arms, whether I have my sand on my feet or across below my sternum, reach my arms back, and then hold on to the elbow crisscross position as you feel the shoulders, whether your arms are in crisscross here behind you, or gotta get my blocks in the right spot here. Thought I had it down. Or I have my arms a little bit up. Okay, but get a feeling of holding your forearms or your elbows here. Now with the shoulders in this direct motion, and if the blocks aren't working for you, you might need to kind of shift them around until you find a reasonable experience for the thighs to center. Okay, and now the pit of the belly, right? That space is moving with the breath. So explore that abdominal breathing. And slow down. Change the crossing of the arms. By now you have likely, this is about the moment when you decide, okay, here I'm restoring, replenishing, right? And replenishing really that fluidic and the fluctuating nature of breathing. And then the structural balance that we set on the prop. So all these positions are important to kind of get right so that your bones feel supported and then your mind is kind of in agreement. It feels in control of the shape. Now let go of the crossing. Position your arms beside you so they're in comfort, right? And if you decide to change your block height and go low and see how that responds in your adductors. So the adductors really have a very strong connection to the psoas, right? And into the pelvis, big time, pelvic floor. So this is a nice kind of entry point with that awareness adjusting. So instead of kind of gripping that space, I'm actually trying to relax it. But the feet together has this kind of interesting conundrum with that, doesn't it? Because they are together, but they're not forcing together. They meet, and with the meeting of the feet, the adductors get the stretch. Okay, so letting the leg muscles open so we can get some expansiveness and fluidity in the thighs, the connection to the psoas, core muscles, also walking muscles. Inhaling and emptying the lungs. Now fine tune the shoulders pressing back into the bolster. Feel that subtle action of the shoulders back, and if that helps stretch the neck, this is great one to work with is shoulders back. Parts of the neck that you might feel like if you were to touch your neck, the areas that are tight are the back or the sides. It's pretty rare you're going to point to the front. They're clearly overstretched from our posture. So if we can work with this openness of the throat and place ourselves in not such a vulnerable position where it's a safe openness, you're not doing a full drop back bend. Okay, now as we come into side sage with the right hip down, have a little mental awareness of what it is we're going to. And then how you're going to get there. It's kind of interesting if you need to follow the images or if there is you've already experienced it enough that you're starting to find ways that are very helpful for you to get there structurally. Okay, so I unbuckle the belt, and if you need to bring your knees to point up to release anything, that's completely fine. Some find that's essential, is to let the knees kind of bounce up. But wait, maybe you can go over without moving the legs to point. So this way we're working with this pelvic floor circulation. It's really good to change up how you're flowing in your poses. Pretty good restorative posture diet is changing. So as I move to the right, I'm going to flow my sand away. If it's on your feet, just kind of scoot it away. I know you might have a little more issue with that to get it up, but you'll find that. Now, as you roll, feel the legs connect inside and then turn to that right. And you've got to move your bolster, right? It's just a simple fact. Bolster's got to shift. So any of the other props that might be in your way, you can also move like a block going over to the other side. But when I'm here, I have this layer, right? So I'm going to lean into the layer, get the ball, on the inner left leg and stretch the left thigh back. So this can be a flexibility energetic, but it's also this inner thigh pull on the left leg. Both inner thighs get work. So add some weight and then drain out from that weight bag, right? Feel when you reach over. Sometimes things go smoothly and sometimes it's a little jarring. But when you do find this massive costal length, right? So the expansiveness, you'll work with the reach of the breath in the ribs, expanding and contracting. And it's kind of a funny thing. I feel when I work on that mental, or I say that to myself, the verbal doesn't connect to the physical reality sometimes. Like you might think that, but if you really study it, maybe that's not what you're feeling. So work to experiment with that, finding widening and contracting, right? So we want to find the body gets the nourishment from these movements of breathing, the fluctuation. Okay, so the left arm could be over, it could be besides, or onto the bolster. They're all good. I don't think one is advanced more than the other. You can make each of these quite introspective in your body. Holding the bolster for me with this left arm, the hand, feels pretty nice, traction for my ribs. So it depends on how far your head is turned on the blanket that will affect that. So you don't have to pivot your neck. You can turn your head down into the blanket as well. Now breathing to explore now, how is the belly moving? How is the back belly moving? And with a few more strokes of breath internally, now with a final kind of wave of stretch in this left side, the sand is really nice to have, a little weight. Think of it this kind of as this fin in your body. I mean, I know you're not a water creature, but you've got kind of these fins, right? If you get to the edge of that with this sand area down to the edge of that shoulder blade and below, when you move that off of your fin, we're going to turn and take that sleeping sage pose. I think I like this one. I'm going to pivot my bolster up and I take my left knee to the right knee and then rotate. This feels the most complimentary for my back and also my tummy. So you've done poses. Go ahead and come into the pose where you're on your back and your knees go side to side. And well, this is pretty similar in your back. It looks like we're doing different things, but they're all pretty relative to each other, all the shapes we do. It's all into support the spine and kind of strumming the spine. It's like very slow playing of music, right, of your body. Okay, now if you're wanting more bolster under your core, you could push the bolster farther down so that when you're on it, you can get a little more massage into your belly. It's been a while since we did sleeping sage. It's a pretty cozy pose, huh? It's a snug to your bolster, snuggle up. Now the brain could be turning, right? I'm pivoting here to the right to look to the screen, see how we're doing. But I would recommend you have your head turned to the left, so the right ear is down. You'll just hear me muffling over there, muffling under my pose turn. But if you have your head turned either direction and you notice, well, I can go to the right, it's quite comfortable for my neck, then you certainly could. And the neck flexibility might be helpful for you to work with just general movement of the neck and letting it stay in the space, it's stretching. And then relaxing the eyes. Flow the breath and feel the back body. Kind of like you're creating a cape in your back, then gently feeling it flex. And now feeling that opportunity to unwind now. So some of you might want to push back to a down dog or do some cat-cow poses before we sit on the bolster. So that's an option. Some are going to decide, no, I'll sit on my bolster, I'll be good. So a few of you might go ahead and come up and then turn towards the back of your mat to your bolster and lift up your knees and stretch into dog pose for a few moments. And some of us might decide, oh, I'm good. And you dog people stay with that. And some of us might go ahead and even if you're not a dog person, dog pose, you can turn and sit on the bolster, but we'll all end up on our bolster to sit. Okay, so taking the pose of choice and then we sit, and when we're sitting on the height of the bolster, I want you to notice the leg offering here, the leg offerings. So try to get the left foot to cross over to the right knee. Give it a try. If it's challenging, you can get higher on your bolster. Like you can add a blanket, right? So the higher up you are, like let's say you're sitting in a chair, a folding chair, well, it would be easier, right? It'd be much easier. So the bolster is not a lot to sit on really in all reality for your structure. But if you can make this position, you don't have to pivot like this, but have the left foot to that right knee. I think you can see me fine. Everyone see this okay? I'm going. Okay. So far, so responding well. Okay. So when you have this position, feel if you can move your hands so either on the bolster or behind. If you're pretty long through those arms, you're going to probably be touching the floor. Some might push on the bolster, and that's a supportive. But you are going to try to lean into your legs forward and down. So the closer my right foot is in, it's a little more to tackle, right, for my circulation, for my sensation. So if you get a little bit more, draw your foot in and then hug under that right knee. So you're a few inches below the knee and then you're pulling yourself down. Now, not required that the foot is that close. I like the leg a little farther forward and then lean in. Now what's changing is the circulation of my ankle, right? It started pretty firm and now it's starting to get a little floppy and sickling. So I've got to stay with flexing my left foot. I have to keep it on the flex, right? So try to stay a little bit structured with that. Okay, now that's pretty easy. We'll go pretty quick into the next one. So you'll notice, well, that's not pretty easy, but you feel the connectivities. And then as you, this isn't activities, it's connectivities. And then as you get into this foot flex, you're going to sit center, straighten the right leg, and then cross the left foot over the right leg. So it's kind of holding it. It's a holder for your leg. And then bring your right elbow to the left leg, right? You're trying to get it over to the left thigh, which is a bit of a gamble. You know, so I'm trying to use my spine flexibility to get here and my ribs. Reach back to your blankets and come into the twist, but noticing different twist than the last one, sleeping sage. You know, it's going against gravity. You're not going with it. I'm definitely not with it. You're strengthening. So if it takes your breath away, it's too much, right? If you've now had some trouble. So you might have to hold the leg instead of hook the elbow, because that's going to change the path into the airway when I'm here pushing and when I'm holding. So I would spend some energy and just feel like the differences with holding, with pushing, And then if there's possibility, you can really strengthen into your stomach zone in your ribs to the twist. Feel the twist in that core piece versus starting to struggle with your back. It's a tough one, right, to work with this twist path. Okay. Now as we come forward and out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take that right leg. Actually, right leg is straight. This is the complicated part today. Left leg crosses over the right leg. So the knee is still perked up. And then I'll get a belt and I'm going to reach it unbuckled to my right foot. So I'm going to toss it over the foot to the bottom and then pull with both hands firm to work on my upright shape. So I'm sitting up, I might be leaning back a little bit, but I want you to explore the movement of forward and stable in your legs. This left leg is the one that might have a little issue with the position because it's basically pushing down on that right leg and supporting the stretch now into your calf. So lean forward like you're kind of peering over your knee, right? Kind of peeking over to see what's going on. And even though you can feel a load of sensation right now in your leg, it doesn't look any different, although there's a lot of different sensations that come up with your feeling self. So you can either stay with the belt and walk your hands farther to the foot down, or you can remove the grip of your hands and put your hands towards the floor or on two blocks, right? You can also use your blocks here. So work with that, leaning forward and flexing the toes up. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a calf delivery, huh? Sensation delivery has gone from the core down through the lower leg muscles. And this is all kind of a build-up usually to inversion, so you really flesh out a lot. So I'm trying to get a lot of circulation fired through the legs, because that's the best delivery, right, to return the blood to the heart. So when I come back up, I'm going to hold on to that belt and be a little carefree about this. It doesn't always go so smooth, but you'll take the left leg out from that crossing. You'll put that left foot, so it's just besides the right, because I don't know where else it's going to step. There's no other leg to step near. And then take your right leg open and then reestablish your body on the bolster, kind of leaning side to side, and then feel that you're seated wide. And the left knee is out. I'm going to use a block, or you can use a ball under your left knee. And then when you feel that openness, if you got a sandbag, add one to the left thigh. This is add-on behavior, okay? Getting the belt and hold on to the belt. See if you can reach your right hand as far down the belt with your spine, like pretty much straight. It might be tipping a tiny bit, but you're a leaning tower here right now for a moment. Okay, now properly bend the right elbow so it's lowering down to the leg. And then you're gonna twist a little bit with this right hand. So the twist is like you're turning, so the flesh of your back is helping you rotate your ribs to the left. And then hold that belt, and you're always welcome to let your head lean down to the right leg. And the left hand could stay on the left thigh. It could reach to the back and relax. And it could also open and lift and extend the waistband by reaching over the left side of the face. Turn your head down towards that right leg so you're careful with your neck. Okay, so feeling that all these movements do fluctuate circulation in our neck. Good. And come into the space here where you're noticing this waist band, this lower back quadrant of the waistband. And maybe you feel a thicker band right from the hip bone to the very side point of the ribs. So just feel the contours. Now, the more you flap around your arm, you might get some different motions to loosen up the struggle in your side. But feel what it's like when you get a little out of the struggle. So you let your left hand go behind your back, and then you let go of the belt. Just kind of get out of the struggle with the belt and the arm positions. And then come up and take a real gentle twist. So we're going to reach our right hand to the left leg. It could be the knee if it's easy to get that. And then feel the body turn to the left a little. So keep it in focus where it's like you've got a straight, extended spine. So I guess it's not straight, it has its arches. But feel that you're lifting through the crown. Okay, so instead of pointing the chin up, right, you have your head level. Maybe your eyes closed helps that. And then push into that right foot, and then feel your body able to twist with that push of the foot a little bit. So I'm trying to encourage you to work with the inner thigh on that right leg to keep it grounded and rooted, and then you turn from that long base of the leg. Yeah, it's kind of fun to do it that way. Just changes up the basic experience of being in a body. Yeah, and I can see sometimes I tilt my body, and I can always work on getting a little bit more lift, inner lift, even though I feel pretty up. Okay, now let go of the grip. That's still a tug, right? To use the hands. And then when you come back in center, we're going to shift our sand away and our belt. And we'll take the second side. So we'll have that right foot up to the left knee. And we're trying our best to sit in the seated pigeon pose. It is a bit of a tricky one. So when I reach under my leg crossing and hold my left knee, I might lean a little bit and kind of bob back and forth to kind of get a feeling of the circuitry in my back of my pelvis into my hip joint. These are all pretty good, right? They're basic, they're very simple. In some way, they're pretty elementary. It's just the sequencing is advanced. So I'll try to keep the sequencing. I can lead us through it, and see if you can follow through and notice the connections. Hopefully I keep it all in the right sequence. Okay, now if I lean a little bit forward, I'm hoping you feel this in your right leg. Many places, maybe not just the inner thigh, but the hip, the buttocks. Now, if that right foot flexes and it was easier the second time, I think it's something to notice, right? You'll have differences in the compensatory patterns that you create during your lifetime. So this is a good opportunity here to lean, okay, and then come back. Doesn't take much to get back right to center. And then flow the hands off the leg, hands to the bolster, push the leg forward, the left one. And then now you're kind of already in your prep. But you've kept that prep going here with that leg crossing. So press through that left heel. Okay, now get a feel when that leg reaches. You're going to keep the rotation now turning to the right. So right hand back, rotate through the rib cage, feel through the torso, and then hook that left elbow to that right leg. Is it different on the second side? I mean, you might feel like, oh, I can cross over with ease on one side more than the other. This is a good time to feel how your right hand is going to support that rotation. Yep, that's right. So feel when you're turning, this is kind of the intense part of the session, right? So working through the rotation, and you can create some gentle quality of breathing with the belly softening. So in the seated twists, we want to let the abdomen be soft. So we keep that intra-abdominal pressure, but we let the stomach move and regulate the massage of the organs. And now, instead of stiffening up the shoulder plates, we'll turn forward and cross that right leg so it's over the left. Now I'm going to try my blocks this time around, just see the difference. So I have this crossing. So it's sort of like tree pose, right? But the leg is crossed over instead of on the inside. So it's the same offering in your back. So when you lean forward, you can take your belt around the bottom of the foot and make sure the buckle is not at the bottom of the foot, and pull yourself forward. Okay, but be thoughtful about the degree of intensity here. Yeah, it might be particularly intense, so you might feel, well, maybe the blocks will be good. As long as you can keep the left foot flexed, you can stay with that energy of the toes back, not just up, but back towards you. And I think this is the stuff that is helpful if you have plantar fasciitis, if you start having any foot, just differences in your feet and their sensations and issues, really to work with the bare foot moving in these positions. It changes the circulation into the legs. Okay, now, however you decide to flow in the forward bend, so you might have the legs positioned here, but the hold on your props is different, whether it's blocks or belt. Now, most of us will tend to use the belt, I'm sure, but when you do position yourself back up, this time let's try this. We're going to uncross that right leg. So the right foot is on the inside of the left leg. And then when we situate our hips onto that bolster, you're going to get your sand first, put it on that right thigh. So the thigh energy on this right leg, block or ball under the leg. Yeah, see what feels good for you. That energy of that leg is open. Okay, now we take the left thigh out, open through that left leg, get your belt and put it under that left foot. And then we push out with the foot, we hold on with the belt, and we rotate. And we want to get a clean pull with that left hand pulling your body down to that leg, left side. And that right arm can either relax behind you, it can reach open, and it can stretch over the side. Okay, now, I would encourage you, first thing would be to turn your head towards your left leg and make sure the neck is comfortable first. And then you can be a little curious, right, about the reaching quality of that right arm. And the waist is part of the arm energy, so it doesn't mean that your arm has to be up. So flexing the left foot, keeping that right hip open, breathing slow. Now, if the right arm stretches up and over and you get that reach, take that moment to move the chest open to the right and up into the hand. Now, right hand moves back and relaxes down. And then your position with that left hand relaxes as well. And we come up to take a gentle twist. So the left hand to the right leg. You might find one side you get the knee easier than the other side. Okay, so it's about your shoulder mobility. So I would tinker with trying to get the same positional touch on the second side. So you might need to change it up. If your foot is farther out, you can put your right foot closer in and lift up the ribs. Yeah, visualize that there is an inner lift here And the inner lift will not likely come from pulling on the leg, right? It's going to come from your sitting powers and your ability to create that inner lift up off of the navel. So it's kind of the opposite of daily habits. It's opposite of driving, right? It's the opposite position for your core. So feel like you're almost kind of leaning back and then lifting up, kind of sitting regally, right? You want to have that inner lift and rotation. And now the spine is up, breathe. Okay, now notice the work in the back. If you're tense in the back and you notice this is back achy, there's work to be done, right? So we want to get to a point where we can sit without pain. Okay, so when we turn back forward, we let go of that leg position, pull, and then take the sand and let's put our feet together in cobbler's pose. Feet together, knees apart. Put your sand across and try to get the feet to kind of open up a little bit. So we're not jamming the footprint, right? We're opening the foot. You can have blocks under your legs or no blocks. If it's knees are off the floor, but it feels okay, then go without them. They will make it easier for you. The blocks will make it much more comfortable. But notice here when the legs are in this broad position, the hips are not closed off, right? So we're advancing our way in towards what we're going to work with on our back in a moment. But I want you to try feeling the shoulders moving back. And then as the shoulders move back, can you put the hands on the very top of the thigh so it touches right towards where you consider your pelvis. So if you were to hold your ribs or you hold your hips, it'd be just a little below. So it feels like you're holding your hip bones actually. And then keep that motion out and lean forward. Hopefully you don't slide off your bolster too much here. But feel the back side of your foot while the little toe side touching together. And that increases. If your legs get jittery or you get cramp or spasm in the inner thigh, you're going to probably resist going farther forward, which is fine. Okay, now feel that inner thigh pull, that stretch on the inner thighs. Okay, now when you come back up, not a long time, we'll take our sand to our core, bring our knees together, and then move a blanket away. So you are left with one behind you and toss it a little bit back so it's still on your mat, but it will be there for your head. Okay. So now as we lower on our back, okay, I want you to feel your blocks are beside you. This is actually somewhat critical. You want your blocks to be at the low height besides each short end of your bolster. Okay, so right on the sides. Now, when I lower back, I've got my hips as close to the front of my wide bolster. And as I move back, my spine is in a natural flexion. And then I take the sand, whatever weight you have, even if it's, a small bag of rice, it's fine. As long as it'll fit on your feet. You might have to get them pretty close. You'll have your legs when they're elevated, and my pelvis is pretty far on the bolster. So, to an eye view, it might look like I'm almost on the other side. So I want you to have that much support for your pelvis. So it's all supported. The back muscles that we've been working quite a bit in our sitting poses need that kind of respite. So when I flex the feet here with the lift of the legs, let your eyes perhaps relax. And if your arms can go out to goal post, if you've got some props that you need to move aside, take the moment. And then experiment with the movement of the legs, small fluctuations. Maybe they go a little bit back towards your upper body, or they go forward. And eventually try to find so that they are straight up and down, vertical. And experiment with the shoulders back. Okay, and that simple flexing of the feet. Now, if the legs are bendy, try to straighten them out. See if you can kind of lift up from the sitting bone to the heel bone as much as possible. So it's like, it's all about the inversion, about getting the legs as high as you can get them in this reasonable position and feeling if you're muscling into it, we're working our way to use that sand to ground our feet. It's just like the ground under you, except now you reverse the flow of gravity to the heart and you're actually resting the organs. That the abdominal organs are actually pushing down to the diaphragm versus the diaphragm pushing into the organs. Now, if you want to try this without the sand, that's perfect for some to work with for a few moments before shifting. If you're feel very competent with the sand, maintain that weight, intensifying that flow of lymph. Keep it simple here, a few more moments. Flexing is a natural part of holding a sandbag. Now, as you bend through the legs, feel it's not just the knees, right? It's the back of the pelvis, it's the hip joints, it's the feet, right? The whole lower branch of the legs has to bend and form a shape to strengthen. So when we come out of this one, what I want you to pattern is, if you toss your sand overhead, you might want to be careful your hands are by your sides. But when you move your sand, if you have one sandbag, you're going to need to keep it. Okay, so you're going to move your knees. I'll show going towards the screen to start. Move your knees to the left on the block. On the block, the legs stop. And then you put your sand on your outer right leg. So let's say that's too much with the block that low. You can tip the block up the next height. Okay, if you're wanting to challenge your body a little bit, you could lower that block down to the lowest height. I relate that it will be a little more work. Right? So do what's correct for you. If your inner thighs are jittery, and that means it's too much and you need to height and get the block higher. So mine's at the second height, I've decided. So feel where the right arm is open and your head turns right. Left arm could be anywhere where it's comfortable. Maybe you're touching your body, feeling your breath, maybe open. And feel the weight of the sand moving into the hip. And give it a few more moments. This will be a pretty full body part of the set. So when you do shift this, it's necessary to keep your weight. So you're going to slide that sand to your belly and then stretch the right leg straight down. Left knee bends, points up, and the sand goes on the top of that right thigh. Okay, so it just stayed on the leg. Now I jab my elbows into the bolster so I can kind of lengthen my waist a tiny bit. That feels nice. So here we take our belt. Some of you will remember this type of sequencing. So it's a smart way. We're kind of working with our brain process and some of these movements for your memory cell of your body, right? Your muscle memory. So when you let that left leg go up and the right leg stretch down, spend the energy on holding the belt with the hands firm versus putting it behind your head. Right? We're going to stay with this strength principle. And get that belt close to the ball of the foot. I'm assuming that's usually where it ends up for most people, but remember when we were stretching our calf, right now we're upside down with it. So it might feel different, but still intense. Breathe. Okay, now close off the belt, bring the left hand to hold it, and move the sand off the right leg. Okay. Now left leg goes out, but the right leg has to move so that you can properly connect in the back of your pelvis and the back of your waist. So I'm going to slide the right foot in, knee points up, okay? Now here's where you get two choices. Choice one, that's the most helpful, easeful. I bring my foot off the ground, I hold the knee open with my right hand, holding the knee, and left leg stretches out. Okay, door two, don't hold the leg, keep the foot on the floor on the other side of the bolster, more challenging, deeper stretch through the leg, right, the whole branch of the leg. So either one will feel suitable for you. So take the suitable version and feel the resistance with that left leg. Instead of backing off on it, you might just let gravity have you and see where it goes. These are particularly interesting for gravity's experience with your experience with gravity, using that to help you mobilize or demobilize, right? It could be either one. Kind of sitting, right, in gravity. Okay, now when you move that left leg up, this is fun for me. Right leg goes down, left leg crosses over. This is setting you up for the second crossover side. So my hand holds the belt, my right hand on my belt is under my left foot. Your left leg crosses to the right. I just get that feel through the leg, the hip, and maybe if you're lucky, the back of the waist. Okay, so as you bend the left knee and you slip the belt off of your foot, you're going to bring both knees up center and let them rock a little side to side. Just keep it in motion. Maybe get busy finding your sand and holding on to it for a second here in your core. Put it on your belly, knees side to side, and then we go to the right with the knees. And we add that sand to the outer left hip. Yeah. Your knees will not be stacked perfectly because of the pelvis, right? We're not evening it quite yet. And it wouldn't be realistic, right, if you've got all these parts. So my emphasis here is the sensation experience, okay? We don't want to make it so difficult that we are struggling, right? Not necessarily breathing, but just the energy of it. So feel where it's kind of interesting, right? You're working through tension. That's important. So that's part of the practice, is working through that. And if the thighs merge and they feel like they keep merging, you know you're doing some good work. Consider it merging of the legs. Right, breath emerges in your mind, feeling. And left arm is open. The right hand could be really open or relaxed and touching the sand. You choose. Touching your core. And now feel where the hip energy is so full when it moves to the right. Okay, so we have different parts of that hip we can work with to help out. So right now it's that whole side layer. And when I move the sand to the front of the thigh, my place to be very careful is the SI joint, but also if you put your hand on your left hip, right above the sand area, I know it's definitely not on the sand, but on the, where you feel everything kind of latches. If you draw your thumb around to the back, right, to where it connects where you feel like your sacrum is, you got to be careful that that area still stays spacious moving into the next shape. So if you kind of rub down that left back side layer from the back of your left hip down towards the buttock, but not really necessarily touching right at the rear, just right above. You want to keep that flesh lengthening, not jamming back. So I'm going to hold the sand and slide it up to the thigh. Now that kind of runs the muscle the other way. But then when you take that left leg straight down, use that reach of the leg like you have somebody pulling your leg, stretching it down. And then bring the right knee up, take a belt, find it, get it under your right foot, and then stretch up that right leg. Yeah. After all these kind of fusing patterns, it'll get a little easier. Okay. Don't make it easier, huh? So pull and get that belt closer to the ball of the foot. If you're perfect with it, ignore that request. And then as you feel the movement of the right leg up, monitor how you want to go with it. If you want to pull your leg towards your core, pull back towards your head, and that feels great for you, go with it. Yeah, if that seems to be a violation, you keep the foot straight up. Sometimes movement is really necessary to juice the joints though, right? There's nothing quite like movement. You know, you need a little of both for certain. You can't have more stretch work, still work without movement. So feeling that balance for your personal edge, stretching back, lengthening, feeling. Left foot could turn out for some of us. It might be able to straighten out, toes up, super dependent on your moment. Okay, now as you push the foot straight up, you're going to hold onto the belt. And I would encourage you to go out with that right leg versus across for this variation. So now I like to get rid of the sand and then hold the knee out to the side. That's my preference. Some will teach with the sand on the leg and stay with this position. My left side of my back gets a little, feels like it grips. So then thus I work with the knee open and hold on to the knee, and then the inner thigh stretches deeper because now it's a connector, right? From the pelvis through the leg. Now your foot could be on the floor, right? And you might work with that connectivity. Or you could be holding onto the knee. If you have limiting factors like wall space or whatever near you, maybe stay a little internal with the emphasis, not get too sidetracked by location issues with your body parts, right? Sometimes you just have to deal. Let it be. Okay, now when that left leg goes straight down, lift up the right thigh towards the sky, cross the left hand to the belt, cross the right leg over to the left, stretch open the right arm. Yeah, really work with this kind of fancy free push into your right heel, okay? So make that energy of pressure and lengthen that outer right thigh. Go for it. Okay, now when you bend through the right knee and you come back into the center, bring both feet up. Buckle your belt together, both feet up into the belt. And then when you connect and push the feet out, you want to have a wide loop. Yeah, be a little ambitious on this. Your legs have adapted over the class time So now that we're in that final spiral, you might notice, my adductors are adapting, but maybe your knees turn in. So, get a touch on the inner knee and give it some connection with the position of the feet moving open. Okay. And then if the legs are reachable, feel them push out into the belt with resistance. And then finally complement that resistance by letting the foot relax, each of them. And then start to bend your knees outwards. And then hold the belt into happy baby pose. So I'm holding my belt and my knees are wide. Yeah, you want to hold the belt pretty firm on this one in the center. And my hands are out wide, so I'm not holding the belt close. I have my elbows close to my knees to keep that sensation and stretch. And this will feed into bridge pose, right? So the inner thigh work and then the quad opening. Okay, now keeping the heels lowering down, take the belt off your feet. And then as you move that belt bye-bye, okay, take the hands to the bolster. Now you certainly can follow your own inner guide on this one. If you want to rock the knees side to side, if you want to alternate stretching your leg down, loosen up the front of the thigh, or shake it out and have a tantrum, that can work too. So when I let the knees bend and I lower the knees to my ribs, I'm going to push the bolster, but feel the massive length in your back now. So when I push it just to the stretch of my arms, not farther than that, I'm going to push and have my fingers move that bolster and then lower my feet down. And move the hands so that they are palms down. Okay, now feel the energy that you might still have left, or you might have a little bit more interest in now doing some very symmetrical shapes. So we push down into our feet. The buttocks feel a tiny bit of connectivity. And when you lift up your hips, flow the hips up. You might move your blanket away, you might keep it. But flow the hips up and bring your arms overhead. Okay, and then lower the spine down. Okay, now get a feel when you continue this drawbridge. So lifting. Now the one thing I didn't add, which I meant to, was a blocker ball between the legs. Okay. So if you're going along pretty well and you don't feel you want to add that, then you can stay with the movement, okay? The main finding I noticed with having something between is the energy as I lower down my spine feels a little bit more in control through my whole back load, the load in my back. So in other words, it's building the muscles, the paraspinals, strengthening. And that's that quality of pushing a little bit into the block, just a mild, when you are kind of offloading the spine, lowering down, right? Lengthening. So when I lift up, I'm loading the muscles. Okay, lifting blocker ball between the knees is optional. You choose. And then finally, we're going to let the spine lower, and we'll give this one a try. I like inversion energetics of bridge. So when we push down, and I sense this might be good for the group, it's a little more advanced. We're going to take the ball or the block. In fact, you're going to need a block for this one. So find a block, take anything away from the center of the knees, and feel the stance on your bolster so it's a little wider than hips distance, tiny bit. Okay. Now, as you lift your hips up, it doesn't matter the width of your feet on your bolster for your block placement. That won't do any difference. But when I lift up, I'm going to try to get my block at the mid-height under, and it's wide across the back. And as I lower my hips down, I have that elevation. Okay. Now, feel if you can move your shoulders back and down like you're lifting up your rib cage. So you're kind of trying to push up your chest and bring your hands towards each other. Now, they're not going to necessarily clasp because of this block situation, but notice where the hands go to touching, and then turn the palms open so they're wide. Hands are wide on the floor, open. Lift the hips, tiny bit, and then put them back down. That was a tiny bit. And straighten out the legs. Straighten out, straighten out. Strut out some legs. Now, if your feet touch on the floor, fine, that's okay. You can also work with pushing the bolster enough in front of you that your feet are not going to be on the floor. I prefer that, but both are fine. But if I don't have my feet on the floor, I'm going to be strengthening and lengthening in the front in a whole different measure. But work with those shoulders back and the chest open. It should feel like a little bit of work to do this. And if your back is twinging, it's a little bit intense, of course you can come out. But if you want to work with trying to enable some new layer of circuitry in your body, feel the shoulders back, the chest open. Work with the arms by your sides. This is key. The arms by your sides, pushing down, opening the chest. Okay, now the arms should feel a little tired from this. They don't usually position themselves this way. Now, elbows press down, hands lift up like robot arms. And slide the feet back in on top of the bolster. Knees point up, push down to your feet. Now lift your hips. Now, before you get out, you're going to slide your block away first. But you're going to bring your hands together and hold on to the hands in this fist position. Hands hold, shoulders back, and try to roll the shoulders down and in towards the spine. You could remove your blanket if you do not care for that under your neck. Okay, if you're fine with it, you can keep it. And then feel how the arms are really pressing. Try not to roll your head side to side, be a little careful. Now, all this energetic through the arms. Now, we're going to drain it all out when we do a forward bend. Pretty soon we'll push back to one. But feel that intensity. You might be able to milk it a few more moments. It's fairly good for the shoulders and obviously for the quads. Now, when I let go of the clasp of my hands and everything kind of fizzles out, lower. And as the spine is all going down and long, scoop up your knees and hold them. And keep that measurement of the knees so that parts of your flesh in your back might feel a little raw, a little bit challenged. And just feel those knees drawing in towards your chest. So breathing. Okay, now I want to complete the practice where we have the end pattern with movement in tabletop, very simple forward bend, but where we really kind of flesh it out or flesh out the flesh. So when you come up to maybe all fours by rock and roll up to sitting, maybe you decide to roll to the side. I think about how the bones would probably organize themselves the best. It's likely going to be a little better to do more of a roll, right? A tuck and roll, so you have the connection of the lower extremities and the upper in the same emphasis versus going just up to your seat. You're going to come up and you'll face back to where your bolster is, but put your blankie in the center and bring the knees, put the blankie, because it's going to be tummy time, right? So it's blankie. Put your knees on that blanket, and I know everyone's got a different connection to this part of the experience. It's going to be real brief, but I want you to have your bolster so it's far forward, and take the hips forward and down and let the spine arch. Okay, alternate flexing and arching, and when you come back to table, round the back and reach the hips towards the feet. Just towards. Come back up through table, round the back to reach through the front of the hip fibers. Lift up the throat. So going to the best of your experience of, if you come into the center and go cat pose, that's fine. If you decide to bypass cat and go back to child. Some of you might even move your blanket farther back so that you can get a really good full child's pose. And let's take a few more. So reaching the ribs forward, lengthen, exhale back. And feeling where that movement is a little bit like cat pose when you move forward, isn't it? So you might find that cat in between isn't really necessary because the spine is fluidic, trying to get you to stretch through the front of the thighs. Okay, now as you come back to table, toes under, hook the toes under, and lift up the knees and stretch back to a fairly expansive dog pose, right? So you might notice that it's a little vulnerable in your nervous system. So if it's feeling too much, you can stay with hands and knees, and that means knees down, and reach back to puppy pose. And if you want to still feel that kind of charge of a dog pose, a charging dog, you could have your hands on your bolster, see a little bit more of that reach. Now, those of you in dog pose with the knees up, maintain that pressure back towards the heels. Feel the weight of your head forward and down. So the body is draining out. Now, those that are in puppy pose that can come back to forward bend, try it. If you don't want to, you could come back to child's pose. But for many of us, we'll come back into standing forward bend and drain out all that work right in the legs, in the spine, and then spine forward and empty out. Hold on to the elbows. Feel the sitting bones elevated. Neck stretching. Change the crossing of the arms. Breathing. Let the arms relax down, and then as you feel the knees bending, your hips move a little side to side. And then with this formula of stretch through the spine, but also through the legs, we're going to fine tune it here all the way through that whole course of the back body. Think of it as a course, right, of circulation that you're working through in your poses. So you're going to find a final pose when you come forward on the hands. If you're already on the knees, then you'll find it here. And you're going to come into either a legs up the bolster bench or up a wall. Okay, so it's that full drain. So now if you're going to choose the bolster bench, I want you to have a couple blocks under, which creates the bench. And if you're going to go to legs up the wall, you want to have your bolster at the base of the wall this way, right? So it's cross. And you're going to sit onto that bolster with your rears close to the wall and swing the legs up, sit down. So if you're bolster benching, you got to have a blanket on top of the bolster and get some height. So roll it up so you get a little higher lift and so the heels can float. Now, if I'm here with my sand option, I can put my sand on my shins, right? If I'm on the wall, I can put my sand on the feet. So choose what seems the most supportive of your nervous system right now. If you are comfy in the center with your bolster and your height of your legs on top of that, or if your hips are on your bolster and you're on the wall, lift them up. And then explore the diaphragmatic breathing line and let the spine settle into its supported shape. And the shape of your hands might be touching on your body or simply beside, so it allows for the room to move in the center of the body with each inhale. Feel that abdominal area lift on the in-breath, it expands. And then as it goes down and the diaphragm is shifting up towards the heart, the abdominal muscles have to actually contract and they fall towards the spine anyhow. So operate the breathing pattern so that you're supporting the very simple and sort of superficial, but it's a fairly emphasized, provided focus right now with in and out breath. And see if you can compartmentalize even the thoughts to this moment of in and out breath. Working with image of expansion and contraction. And fluctuations of breathing along the structure. Relax the legs. Feel that you don't have to have muscular tension right now in your legs, whether they're at the wall that supports them or they're on the bolster. And let your head nod a little from side to side so the back of your neck is shifting from one side to the next. Now meeting back, centering awareness in your body and also with the collective in practice. If you're at the wall, you're going to start to bend through the knees, shift the legs a little bit away, and then carefully move the sand. And you might bring your feet to soles together, knees open, and foot prayer, the wall. At the bolster, we're going to start to shift our weight in our hands. And then if you have sand, you need to pull the knees in right across to your hand to get the sand away, right? That's essential. And then you can meet back to that feet closed, knees out. Or let your legs rest on the bolster bench. Okay, let's start to join the thighs to the core piece. So the thighs move in whatever direction you're in at the wall or the bolster. In the center, you can pull the knees to the chest. And then when you roll to side, feel both of the sides. And then feel that you're merging into one, right? You're rolling and you're going to come up maybe at the wall at your back or maybe in the center, depending on your alignment standards, right? Walls are good to sit next to support you. And when you feel your sitting bones on the secure space of lift from the bolster of the blanket, find that energy of the thighs moving outwards from the pelvic basin and lift the hands into each other and feel how they formulate connection. So let's measure that awareness, that support to each other in this practice.